Today's Cabernet tasting is quote-unquote big Cabernets, but instead of big name today, I went big, more in style, did a little bit more, somewhat known quantities, but a little bit more under the radar. There's no Silver Oaks or Canases or Dominuses in today's tasting. There's kind of the level of wines that I think are every bit as good as some of the biggest names in California. So first two wines in today's tasting are both from Washington State. They're both wines that I found on a trip to Washington a number of years ago in wineries that I've worked with since. The first wine is from Mark Ryan Winery. Both the wineries are in a business park in Woodinville, Washington, with about 20 other wineries. That's not much to look at, but some really great talent there. So Mark Ryan Winery, this is the Dead Horse. The Dead Horse is kind of their left bank Bordeaux style blend. They have another wine called Long Haul, which is right bank. So this is from two different vineyards, Ciel de Cheval and the Clipson Vineyard. And 60% Cabernet, 15% Cabernet Franc, 11% Malbec, 8 Merlot, 6 Petit Verdot, and I think one of the most talented young winemakers in Washington is making this wine. We really love these wines. They're classic styled wines, but they're pure Washington. And
tell us about the Guardian.
So Guardian Cellars, I found the same day that I found Mark Ryan when I was in Washington. Ryan Nebelia of Mark Ryan Winery said, hey, you got to meet some of my buddies here in the park. And one of the guys he introduced us to was Jerry. And I'm not going to say his last name, and there's a very good reason for it, because Jerry is an undercover narcotics agent in Washington State. Great guy, totally unassuming. That's probably what makes him such a good agent. But he does the wines on the side. And they're very, very good. He, again, does a lot of Bordeaux-style blends and a little bit of Syrah. And all of his names, obviously Guardian Cellar, kind of a law enforcement theme, but this is called The Wanted. He does some other wines that all have kind of law enforcement proprietary names. And this is a blended Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc. And it is from one vineyard called Stillwater Creek Vineyard, 21 months and 75% new French oak, and just a big, massive, chunky Washington State wine from '09, which is a really ripe vintage in Washington, similar to, say, the level of ripeness that we saw in '03 in Bordeaux or something along those lines. So it's a very ripe year, a very fruit-forward year, and a big, mouth-filling kind of wine. Okay, so Rudy. Rudy is the second label of Von Strasser Winery. This is a wine that was one of our most successful Cabernets of 2011. This is the subsequent vintage, 2009. And I think it's actually even better than the 08, which is pretty typical for the vintages. I like 09 a little bit better than 08 in Napa Valley proper. We found this wine on a K&L trip with a bunch of our staff, Gary included, and fell in love with the wine, did really well with it, and we're really happy to have it back. So this is both estate and a little tiny bit of Valley Floor fruit from Rudy Von Strasser, who was the first American intern ever at Mouton Rothschild, and just a really pleasant man, a really thoughtful winemaker, and makes really delicious wines under the Von Strasser label. And we're really happy to have the Rudy label and its kind of brothers and sisters, now the Sauvignon Blanc and the Petit Syrah as well under the Rudy label. So York Creek, this is honestly a winery that I could talk about for quite some time, but I'll keep it short. York Creek is Fritz Maytag's winery, and if that name sounds familiar, there's a good reason. Fritz is a James Beard Award winner. He was the former owner of Anchor Brewing and Distilling. He's just an all-around kind of Renaissance man. And we had sold these ones for a long time. They lost distribution. I called Fritz personally. He came down and made us a spectacular deal on this wine. This was a wine that we happily sold for $60 in the past. And this is $29.99, a steal of a wine. It's all estate fruit from Spring Mountain. It is a Bordeaux blend. It's 80%, 85% Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot. And if you like structural Spring Mountain wines, I think this holds up with any of the people on the mountain for a song. It's what I say is the best Cabernet value that we have in the store currently, and a lot of our staff and Kano customers would certainly back it up. So Ridge Estate, honestly there's not a whole lot I can say about Ridge that people probably don't already know. This estate bottling used to formerly be called the Santa Cruz Mountain Red bottling, and it got a little bit confusing, so they changed the nomenclature, so it's now called Estate Cabernet. Some of you may notice on the label that it says Montebello Vineyards, and this does come from the same vineyard and is treated in much in the same way as their legendary Montebello bottling, although it comes from blocks that are a little bit younger on the property and also barrels that don't make the cut for the Montebello bottling. We've loved this wine for a long time, dating back a number of years, and 09, a great vintage there, very structural, a wine that I think it needs a little bit of time to really come around. They released it a little bit earlier than usual this year. So Mount Eden Vineyards, neighbor to Ridge. I wanted to taste these wines side by side. Although they're different vintages, I think they have a lot in common from a winery point of view. This is, again, a mostly Cabernet bottling. It's 82% Cabernet, and the rest is Merlot and Petit Verdot. And Ridge, 100% American oak. Mount Eden is a blend of French and American oak, and I think that American oak really gives a different style and character to these wines overall. We love the Patterson family at Mount Eden. We do a lot of business with them. This wine isn't going to last for long. It's another very short vintage for Mount Eden Estate Cabernet, so get some while you can. So Heights Cellars, this is the Bella Oaks Vineyard 2007 bottling. And somewhat of a sad story, and this will be the last bottling of Bella Oaks that Heights Cellars makes. The family that owns Bella Oaks is taking back the vineyard and going to be making wine of their own. So it leaves Heights as kind of the odd man out after a number of vintages from Bella Oaks. So a little bit sad, but they're going out with a bang. 07, just tremendous wine, such great clarity, but at the same time tons of pitchy, sappy fruit. A wine that's going to last a long, long time, as the Heights wines generally do. Heights also uses a blend of American and French oak, although a little bit differently. They actually age their wine for a year in large stand-up old American oak tanks, and then rack it off into French oak barrels. So 09 Larkmead Cabernet Sauvignon. We've liked Larkmead for a while, but I was really impressed with them on a recent trip to Napa. Their winemaker, Andy Smith, a young Scottish gentleman who also makes Dumal and Gemstone, is a wildly talented winemaker. And I was really impressed by the class and delicacy and kind of the feminine nature of these wines out of Napa Valley. They're a little bit more north in the valley, kind of near Calistoga, and I think it's a little bit cooler there, and it leads to a little bit better sense of acidity. And Andy's just a winemaker that builds wines on acid anyway, so a really kind of pretty, delicious wine that's going to last a long, long time. And the stuff that's coming from Larkmead down the pipe is just really, really phenomenal stuff. Actually, you taste the tin out of the barrel, very, very good, and the upper tier bottlings from Larkmead were some of the most impressive wines that I had on that trip. So 2001 Corison, this is the Napa Valley bottling. Kathy Corison has long been one of my personal favorite winemakers. She's made wine for some very good wineries over the years in Napa Valley, including Chapelet and York Creek. She is a minimalist winemaker. She lets the wine be made more in the vineyard than she does in her cellar. And the great thing about Kathy is that she always has library releases for us. And this is a 2001, which I think is one of the best three vintages of the 2000s for aging potential. And I wanted to show something today that was a little bit older, to always to try to teach people what Cabernet can do. That you don't have to drink it young and get your teeth kicked in by a bunch of tannins, but there can be wines that age gracefully and that don't cost you an arm and a leg. So last but not least, Arno Roberts. This is the Bouguet Vineyard from Sonoma County. It's in the Mayacamas range. Arno Roberts are certainly one of the darlings of the wine world right now, and for very good reason. If you talk to any of the sommeliers in San Francisco and say, what's your 5 top California producers, Arno Roberts is probably going to be in 99% of their list. And the reason why is they make wine in a completely different way. It's wine that's based on complexity, delicacy, and first and foremost, acidity. It's 2 partners, one of which has been a winemaker at numerous places throughout Napa Valley, and another that's actually a cooper. Both very, very nice young men, and making some of the really most interesting and coolest wines out there in California right now. They started making Cabernet. They do make some other things, including Syrah and Chardonnay, and they make some really wild things like Trousseau Gris, which is delicious. So not the cheapest wines in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely if you're looking for something interesting and you want to take a splurge, really good place to start in California right now.